Konnichiwa. Today we're going to talk about kanji, how they fit together, how they work, and I think we're going to get a few insights that will be rather helpful. Some people sometimes worry that there are a number of words written in kanji that have exactly the same pronunciation. This is quite a common phenomenon in Japanese, and I think this is a worry particular to beginners and to people who've done a lot of study but not very much actual immersion. So they have all these abstract words piled up, and they're not aware of the fact that in actual use they're not a problem. When you're trying to memorize them off lists, they are a problem. And I've done a video about how we can actually use this phenomenon of Japanese homophones to our advantage, but only if we're actually doing immersion. Now, a phenomenon that people talk about much less frequently is what we might call the equal and opposite phenomenon, that there are quite a lot of words in Japanese that are the same word and are pronounced the same, but have different kanji. And we find this not just with obscure words, but very common words. Words like miru, look, and kiku here have one commonly known kanji, and then two or three others that are used quite frequently for the same word. So first of all, let's ask ourselves why this happens. Well, in these cases, it's nearly always going to be the kun reading of the word, that's to say the native Japanese reading. So what's happened is not that the word's been taken in from China and given a reading approximate to its original Chinese reading, but it's a word that existed in Japanese before Chinese characters ever came to Japan. And as in most cases, a kanji is attached to the native Japanese word, but in some cases, more than one kanji is attached to the same Japanese word. Why would that happen? Well, it happens because, as I explained before, words do not represent a single point on the meaning spectrum. They represent a range within the meaning spectrum. And that's why it's really quite rare to find a Japanese word that corresponds exactly to the supposed English translation word that the dictionaries give. Because while they may overlap, and often overlap to a very large extent, very rarely do they cover exactly the same section of the meaning spectrum. Now, when more than one kanji is applied to the same word, usually what's happening is that the different shadings of the meaning spectrum are being expressed by the different kanji. This gives us a way in writing to stress particular nuances and aspects of the word. And this phenomenon can be separated into two types. There's the type like the see and hear kanji, in which all the meanings overlap in the basic central kanji, so we're really talking about the same word and then some nuances. And then there's the type where they don't actually overlap at all. An example of this is the word atsui. There are three kanji for atsui, one that means a hot thing, hot as in a hot object, one that means hot as in hot weather or a hot day, and one that actually means thick or fat or kind. Now these three don't overlap at all. It would actually be a mistake to use the hot thing one when you're talking about hot weather, or the thick and fat one when you're talking about a hot day. It would in fact be possible to argue that these are three different words with the same pronunciation. It would be one of those rather pointless arguments that you couldn't prove one way or the other, and wouldn't really matter if you could. But the point is you could theoretically make that argument that you have three different words pronounced atsui. Now the other and commoner kind is, like as I've said, the words for see or hear, and we have this same phenomenon in quite a number of words where there's one central simple kanji, the one that children learn first in school, the one that you probably know if you don't know a lot of kanji, and then there are the other two. The one simple central one can, in most cases, be used for all the meanings. The others are kind of optional when we want to stress a particular aspect. And we're going to take as our example case here what I call the three wakarus. Some rather silly people liken them to an Australian circus act called the Three Wackaroos. Who did that? And they look like this. Now, Each of them is a way of writing the word wakaru, the basic meaning of which is do clear or do understandable. You can't translate it directly into English because in English you can't do understandable, but in Japanese you can. It's a verb. Doesn't, of course, mean understand. So the vandals who tell you that honga wakaru means I understand the book are really setting dynamite under your understanding of Japanese and its particles. Honga wakaru, obviously it's the book that's doing something, and what it's doing is the act of understandability in relation to you. And this one, as is usual with these groups, with one simple central kanji and other kanji, the basic kanji can be and is used for any of the whole range of meanings, but the other two are used for specific areas. So the basic kanji is this one. As you see, it's made up of a sword, the simple kanji element for sword, dividing something into two. Its fundamental meaning is separate or divide. It's the word for minute, because a minute is the basic division of time. And with that on reading fun, it's actually a sound sister. So if we see this fun element inside another more complex kanji, we'll know that the on reading of that kanji is probably going to be fun or bun. Now, there are two variants on this. The first is this one. And if we look at it, we can see that it's actually fundamentally, in terms of its symbolism, the same as the first one. We have the element that means a sword or a knife, and the element that means halving or dividing in two. The on reading of this element is han, and we know this easily enough because the left-hand element is actually a sound sister, so anything with this in is likely to have the on reading han. The implication when we use this kanji for wakaru is the idea of judgment. And we can see this in the kanji itself as well. We have the long sword and the dividing in half. It's used in words like handan, which mean judgment. So where we're talking about wakaru in a way that implies judgment, such as hannin ga wakaru, the criminal has become known, the criminal has been discerned, determined. This is the one we're going to use if we don't use the base one. We can use the base one. But if we want to stress this element of judgment, of having arrived at a conclusion from evidence, this is the one to use. Now the other one is this one. And let's notice that the sword is in all three of them. In the upper right-hand corner we have the sword again. But this one has the on reading kai, and we know it from words like rikai, which means understand. That's the word you have to use if you really want to say understand, because wakaru doesn't mean understand, it means do understandable. This kanji has the general meaning of unraveling or untangling. Toku is to untangle or undo something, and if you're fond of puzzles or puzzle games, you're probably aware of the word nazotoki, which means puzzle solving. Nazo, puzzle, and toki, solving, undoing, unraveling the mystery. Now, strictly speaking, this is the one we also want when we're saying that something is doing understandable. When we say Nihongo ga wakaru, Japanese is understandable to me. If we had to choose one of the two specialized ones, this is the one we would have to use. If we wanted to make it absolutely clear that we meant wakaru in that sense, we would use this one. Otherwise, most of the time, we usually use the regular old wakaru kanji that we all learned at the beginning. So what about the regular old one? Does that have any special implication? It's not really possible in the case of these kanji groups, where there's one central one that can be used in place of any of the others, and usually is. It's not possible to say that it has a specific meaning because it has all the meanings. But when you're differentiating, the base meaning of this one is the meaning which is essentially do known. As you know, very often when we say wakaranai, we mean I don't know. When we say nani nani ga wakaru, we're often asking, is this known to you? So to take an example where we can look at the distinct characteristics of each. Suppose someone were to ask, what is the oldest turtle that has ever lived? And you answer wakaranai. Now, in this case, there can be a confusion over the exact meaning of wakaranai. You could mean, I don't know how long a turtle has lived, or I don't understand the question. If you could specifically say wakaranai with this kanji, it would be clear that you meant the latter, I don't understand the question. If you answered with this kanji, wakaranai, the implication is that is not something on which I'm able to form a judgment. And if you answer with the base kanji, it would have that base meaning of the word simply, I don't know. I don't know how long a turtle has lived. In practice, most of the time you're going to be using the base kanji, but if you're writing, you can use one of the others for disambiguation. And if you're speaking, your tone and general manner is going to tell someone if you mean that you can't understand what they're talking about. Now, since the regular one is what's used most of the time, you might ask, why do we need to know the others? And the reason is that we will see them pretty often in immersion. They get used in writing quite a lot of the time. And in the first place, of course, we want to know what they mean. We want to know that we are seeing the word wakaru here, or the word miru, or the word kiku, or whatever other word it may be. And then it's a good idea to know what they mean by using this particular variant of the word, which is being used for a good reason. They're trying to tell you something specific by choosing that particular kanji. So it may be a good idea for us to go into some more of these kanji groups in the future. If you're interested to hear that, please let me know in the comments below. If you have other questions or comments, please put them in the comments below, and I will answer as usual. I'd like to thank my gold Kokeshi patrons, and my red Kokeshi patrons, my pink Kokeshi patrons, and my blue Kokeshi patrons, all the patrons and supporters who make these videos possible, and help me to keep them free for all of you who can't afford to support me. And for those of you who can't, thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for liking. Thank you for doing all the things you're doing to keep this channel going. And you, sitting there right now, thank you for attending this lesson. Korekara mo yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Class dismissed.